watch your chat. It's live.
Good evening for all of you that are watching us right now via Facebook Live. My name is Freddy Barton. I'm the Executive Director for Safe and Sound Hillsborough, here to moderate a discussion centering around early childhood education and the importance to address what's needed in order to create a good environment to do so. Here joining us is a panel of esteemed guests and subject matter experts from different walks of life that are here to contribute to this topic. We know that there are several of you that have watched the documentary No Small Matter, and you may have comments about it. You may have questions. What do we as a community need to really do? We're going to have several questions that we're going to ask to our panelists. And we ask that as you watch this out into the community, if you have any questions, we want you to send your comments via Facebook Live. We'll field those questions to the appropriate person and also open it up to anyone that's either watching, participating in the panel, or even listening through some other conduit. We're going to introduce our panelists first. And the first question that we're going to ask as they introduce themselves is, what did you get from this video? Explain it to the people that are watching Facebook Live as if they've never seen it. There are plenty of people that are going to be watching us that have never seen this documentary, don't know what we're going to talk about, but are just interested in the work that Safe and Sound and all of you do. So first, we'll start with Stevania Dixon. Introduce yourself, let us know who you are, and tell us a little bit about the documentary and what you got from it and what you want people to know about it.
Thank you, Freddie. My name is Stevania Dixon, and I am a school improvement specialist for the Florida Department of Education, serving the Southwest region of Florida K-12 public schools. The one thing that I gathered from No Small Matter is that our best public return is in childhood education, and that as a society, we need to ensure that every child has access to a high quality education and their families have access to wraparound services that are consistent. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Angela Chowning.
Thank you for having me. My name is Angela Chowning. I'm the program manager for Hillsborough County Child Care Licensing. We inspect and regulate child care facilities and family child care homes here in Hillsborough County. And the documentary, it's the second time I've watched it, absolutely astounding. And I think it affirms all the work that I know a lot of my colleagues have been doing in the early childhood field, how important it is. A couple of takeaways I took from it is I never really knew the military's viewpoint on, the national security issue. And then the other takeaway I took was from the early childhood teachers that were in the documentary that really said that they felt like they were not valued and almost invisible. That was heartbreaking, but a very, very good documentary. Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have our Temple Terrace Police Chief.
Good. Chief here in Temple Terrace, a career public servant, started off in the military. Served in the 82nd Airborne as a paratrooper and a military police investigator. And then for the last 33 years, I've been a police officer serving here in Hillsborough County. For me, what I took away from it was an affirmation, actually, of some of the things that we speak of at Safe and Sound, how important it is to have that early opportunity to have an impact on the kids and to help that foundation to develop in the appropriate manner, so our kids, all kids, can have that opportunity to have the affirmation that they need. Probably the biggest thing that I took away was, I mean, everybody, at least in coming up, really understands how important and how smart our children are at the very beginning, but to see the part about the synapses connecting and how the positive interactions create more and more, and how negative interactions start to turn some of those things off. And that can be taken from the documentary in that early stage and then applied to as they develop. The same thing happens. The same thing happens as we become from the children of that age to the pre-K and the middle school and into high school, into adult life. It's those positive interactions that really do matter the most, and that's what we try to push at Safe and Sound. So that's what I took away.
All right. Well, good evening. My name is Edwin Narain. I'm the current chair of the Children's Board of Hillsborough County. I'm also a former state representative here in the state of Florida. I'm proud to be with you all tonight to discuss this great movie that I had the opportunity to screen, No Small Matter. And I would encourage all of you who are out there who are watching today, if you haven't seen the movie, it is available on the streaming platforms for rent or for purchase. Take an hour and some change and take a look at it. Because what it did for me was it helped to dispel some of the myths that people have about babies and children, that they're not learning between ages 0 to 5, when the studies show the exact opposite, that 75% of the brain growth is happening between the age 0 to 3. And, you know, the outcomes that you see happening with young babies, young children in that 0 to 5 age group actually tie right back into all the societal ills that we have going on. So if there are positive outcomes with the kids from an education standpoint early on, we can expect them to be positive citizens. But if those children aren't given the educational opportunities that some kids and well-off families are giving at an early age, you see how it leads to potential criminal activity later on in life, all the way down to negative health benefits that affect people. So it's really important that we get a grasp around this issue and start to take action into creating a quality early education system for all kids, no matter where they live.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Marnie Fuente. I am Program Director of the Quality Early Education System and the support program's Conscious Awareness Learning Model and Early Literacy Matters at Hillsborough Community College. I think the documentary was brilliant and much needed. I've been in this field for over 20 years, and not much has changed from when I was a preschool teacher in an infant classroom. And you know what really struck me was, especially now, how the early childhood providers feel. And you know, they are so important, and we have seen that day in and day out since this pandemic. And I just found it very timely that all of this is happening, because they are such heroes and their work is so important, and we couldn't do any of what we do without them. And you know, my hat's off to them and any of them that are watching. And I think that it's important for people outside of the field of early childhood, whether you have a child of your own or not, to watch it, because we all have an impact on early learning and how we respond to each other, how we react to everything in our environment. That stays with the child. And if they're negative experiences, then those will be triggers for them later in life. And you know, it's not fair to them. So it's our job as citizens, no matter what our profession is, to support our youngest learners and our providers.
Good evening. I'm Anthony Collins from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, major assigned to District 5. The documentary No Small Matter was very impactful, and it proved and it displayed how the ages from 1 to 3 are so impactful to youth in their progression as they rise from young adults and throughout the rest of their lives. And it's simple, and even as we compare it to how a theory we subscribe to at Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, and Chad Cronster, Sheriff Chad Cronster is a huge proponent of what Frederick Douglass stated, is it's easier to build stronger children than to rebuild broken men. And this documentary was a prime example of that. And that is a theory that we should all be subscribing to. Instead of focusing on rehabilitation, we should be trying to prevent these issues before they even manifest themselves.
So thank you all for introducing yourselves to the community at large that's watching it. And once again, if you, anyone that's watching this right now via Facebook Live or joining us at any time during this, if you have questions, please feel free in comments and we'll get those questions answered. We're going to jump right in this. You know, right now, especially with the way things happen with COVID, where we're stressing as parents about what's going to happen in schools. And we want to make sure that no matter what, if kids are staying home, they're going back to school, that they have a high quality education. But we haven't had the discussion about our early learners, our littles. And so, Marnie, to start us off, you know, we know that the school district's working hard, but how do all children get access to high quality early learning education? How do they do that?
Well, we know that there are inequities in access to early education. And the only way to really address this issue is by having a collaborative approach by, with both the public and the private sectors working together on solutions. And I think it's equally important that both of the public and private sector make it a priority to understand the complexities of early learning and the essential role that it plays in the community, both from a social and an economic standpoint. And really understanding the brain development and everything that the documentary talks about, you can see why it's important and how everybody will benefit from it.
Chief, I want you to kind of weigh in on this too, because, you know, Marnie led this with something that's very appropriate right now. There are inequities all throughout our educational system. And we have to also look at, when we look at access, there's inequities regarding access. You were instrumental in launching an effort in Temple Terrace to make sure that kids from East Campus and the university area had a safe place to go and develop. So follow up with that about what you were able to help coordinate and how you're able to incorporate that into the early childhood learning environment for those 0 to 3 year olds and the siblings thereof.
Well, early on, Freddie, in my career as an officer out on the street, it was very obvious to me that the positive interactions that officers could have with the young children in our communities had an obvious positive impact with having some light issues with the majority of them. Kind of live by a rule: you can't save everybody, but you certainly can reach out to the community and save those that you can. So throughout my career, that's always been something that I've tried to employ when I was working on the street. When I came to Temple Terrace, I actually had the opportunity to become chief, and as chief, it was one of my priorities to do what I could to try to get people on board with establishing a Boys and Girls Club here in Temple Terrace. A piece of property came available that's in the county. It was really a cooperation with Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Children's Board supported it, Safe and Sound supported it, but it was to provide for a place within our community that not only Temple Terrace kids, but Tampa kids and Hillsborough County kids could all come together to have a positive, safe environment, a place where they could come to play and to learn and to interact with one another. Not just club kids, but actually to interact with kids. We also have here in Temple Terrace a family rec center. So it was bringing kids together, because you know what, Freddy, kids don't know any difference. Kids are kids, and you bring kids together, they can play and they can learn and they can grow and they can develop. And that was the overriding goal, to be able to create a place where all kids, regardless of socioeconomic situations, single family, in many cases without cost at all, if that becomes necessary through scholarships and such, that we could have a positive impact on the children. More importantly, as you mentioned, once you get a child into the clubs, it enables you to make contact through that child with the families. And that enables you to reach out to the younger ones, and the child that you're mentoring and showing love to in the club takes that home, because as the documentary pointed out, even in the schools or in the club, you only get so much time to be with them. So if you really want to make a difference, it's engaging the families and helping the families to establish those positive interactions within the family group, and reaching out to those younger ones in the family so that our moms and dads to be there when they have to be away, to add, as you say all the time, it takes a village to be part of that village. And from the law enforcement perspective, what's really valuable for me is giving those first impressions of the men and the women that serve their communities throughout Hillsborough County and Temple Terrace, giving them that power. So that's what we've done here, and it's been emulated all over the place. We actually used our model from Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. It's very successful. Last thing I'll say too, I know I'm talking too much, is the Children's Board. We brought in a developmental resource center with the help of the Children's Board in Kelly Parish. Phenomenal. They just opened that up, and that provides a plethora of resources and opportunities for our community as well.
Awesome. Awesome. So we'll go ahead and move into, so we know that there are some things being done. And, Stevania and Angela, you guys see this on different sides, not just in Tampa, but, all around the Tampa Bay community. So how does, when we look at the investment in the early childhood education, how does this really impact families, communities, schools, businesses? How does it really impact? Stevania, let's start with you.
So I think the first thing for me, in terms of impact is that, we would hope that it thins out the school to prison pipeline. And, the earlier our kids learn to read, they'll stay in school, their confidence levels are higher, they avoid trouble with the law, and ultimately they end up being good stewards of society. But it's imperative that we understand that schools can't fix it alone. So in order for us to actually have sustainability, it has to be a collaborative effort, which we've heard repeated throughout tonight thus far. And then ultimately those education benefits become economic benefits. But I just think, in terms of just thinking about, what our kids need right now, and thinking about things that are offered in the community, in terms of centers. I know specifically Layla's House in Sulphur Springs, what we offer to parents, the consistency of that, and then just making sure that kids are exposed to, those things that they need in early stages, like making the best use of playtime. I heard someone, the chief, talking about kids playing. That's important in early childhood. When we think about teaching kids how to identify and express feelings, that's important in the early childhood stages. When we're teaching kids how to be independent or understanding, parents understanding their child's behavior, I immediately go back to what are we doing to educate parents, around those particular standards or those particular opportunities that they can help, their students at home. Because if we're not being consistent around the board, I just think that we're back, we'll be back to square one. So yeah, that again, I see a lot throughout communities and schools. Of course, I see a lot in schools, but again, we can't fix it alone.
Angela, chime in for us.
Thank you. So, as we saw in the documentary, a good investment has tentacles that just extend out. From a licensing perspective, what we are taking care of is just the basic environments and rules and regulations for childcare. So we're ensuring that children that are in preschool are in the, in a safe environment. They've got enough equipment, the staff are trained, there's background screening, all of those good things that we consider as the baseline for quality, just simple safeness. And then, a lot of our regulations have been tweaked to implement those developmentally appropriate practices that we want to see in childcare. And the impact of that is if a child has a stable environment, a stable teacher, then they're better prepared for kindergarten. And I think that's where you see the lasting effect immediately. There's lots of long-term effects, but in the short term, if children are stable, safe, very prepared for kindergarten, then, they go into school and it's a nice, smooth transition. So, yeah, thank you.
Awesome. You know, I think a couple of people have said this. You know, we've heard over and over that children as young as 3 and 4, they start forming opinions about things. But now, after watching this documentary, we see children start learning minutes after they're born, right? And they start mimicking things. In the wake of things that have happened in our nation, we see this hitting our communities. And we're starting to see that children as young as 1 and 2 years old are starting to form certain opinions. So this is a question for Major Collins and then Chief Albano. I know you kind of talked about what you guys have done in Temple Terrace, but when we look at equity and when we look at equality, I want to know, what is your organization specifically doing to bring equity and equality to the early learning space, as well as just the community in general? First, I'll start with Major Collins.
So at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, it's a multi-pronged approach. And it starts with a workforce that is diverse, and it reflects the communities that we serve. Much like the documentary No Small Matter, if I could see it, I could be it. And kids mimic what they see, especially at that age, between 1 to 3. So first off, it starts with that, and at this stage of the game, we're 59.9% diverse within the Sheriff's Office. So that's for starters. From there, then you go to outreach. Much like Chief Albino spoke about, we do have a relationship with the Boys and Girls Club. We opened our first Boys and Girls Club back in 2013, Freddy Solomon Boys and Girls Club in Nucio Park. From there, we have expanded that one club to 7 clubs total. We have a deputy assigned to each club, and I say assigned to each club. That is their full-time job. They are embedded in the club, not for the purpose of law enforcement functions, but for the purpose of bridging the gap between law enforcement and the community, as well as being a steward for the community as well. We have tons of other programs. Truth of the matter is we don't have any programs, and I don't think you're going to find a whole lot of agencies across the country that have programs that specifically address the ages from 1 to 3, which is why I think it goes back to my initial statement of us having a diverse workforce, because in most interactions, truthfully, from 1 to 3, the real interaction is going to be in the instance where it may be an issue between a father and mother, and now we're in the home and we have to take some kind of law enforcement action in those situations. So if we have a workforce that understands culture, diversity, and those things, then that's when those things come into play, and that's how you establish equity and those facts that we talked about earlier.
Awesome. Chief?
Well, ditto to the Major. Very well said. It starts, Freddie, quite frankly, with the officers and the philosophy and modeling the way that the law enforcement community really should be, and interacting well within the communities. All the calls, every time an officer goes out to a call, those little ones are watching, and it builds upon that. You have to establish trust. You have to be able to impress upon them that that there are situations that you have to deal with, and as they get older, they're more capable of understanding. But you build trust within your interactions in the community. We go in primarily in summer camp, and we take over a portion of the time, and we don't go in there with an agenda. We go in there to play and to interact and answer questions and give truthful and honest responses. And I think that goes a long way. I really wished we had a greater opportunity. The younger any of these positive interactions can take place, the better off that it is. But truthfully, at the club and even at the resource center, the children's board that recently opened, it's all about coming alongside them, partnering with them. Again, it goes back to what Safe and Sound's all about. Partnering with them to be able to come alongside and show them that law enforcement officers is a whole lot more to them than just law enforcement.
No, Ed, You have a unique perspective because not only do you represent the private sector, you're also a former legislator. And from what I hear, you're probably going to be a future legislator as well. So, but we've heard the word workforce popped up a couple of times, right? In that documentary, we heard from some of the workers. We heard from some parents. The words quality of life popped up. The word workforce. So I want you to chime in for two perspectives. One, explain the connection between having a strong early learning system and the correlation with a good workforce. And then legislatively, what are some things that individuals in Tallahassee and nationally can do to make sure that we address quality of life for those workers that do this? And before you do that, I want to bring something up that just struck me. One of the workers talked about their salary and what the fact that they had to have a second job. And we know that there are plenty of teachers that have to do that as well in our elementary, middle, and even high school. But we know that the pay difference is still significantly different. However, early childhood learning is the most impactful, right? So talk about that, especially with that last statement that I gave.
So you would give me a twofer, right? So I'll start talking about the workforce component. And for those who had an opportunity to watch the documentary, one of the things you'll notice is they quoted some really dire statistics. Obviously, children that don't have that opportunity to come up through an early childhood education system and then move into quality education, K through 12 system, they're 13 times more likely to drop out of high school. And at that point, they're 50% more likely to end up in the hands of the law. And that becomes a very expensive thing for the country. And so when you look at it from just a workforce perspective, you're talking about losing adults from the time they're born. And that's like kind of crazy. When you think about us living in the greatest country in the world, we have the resources if we were to choose to put them behind things that matter. If you want to find out what people value, look at what they spend money on, both in their household and in their budgets when it comes down to government. And legislatively, one of the things that we haven't done is we don't have what's considered a high quality early education system. We have a high quality K through 12 system. And for 30 years, we've been going back and forth about how to tweak that to make it the best in the world. We have a very good VPK system, but we don't have an early education system that has certified standards that they can share with parents. If we're going to be completely honest about how parents make decisions about where they're going to place their children when they go back to work, it's usually in a daycare that's either closest to home or close to work, because when they get off, they've got to pick that child up. The last thing they're thinking about is education. Is my child going to be educated or exposed to things that's going to grow their brain? They're more concerned about, is the child safe? And is my child going to be close enough for me to get off of work and get them on, pick them up on time without having to pay a penalty? So we've got to kind of shift mindsets. And I think that starts with the legislature. If the legislature decides to put the resources behind developing a system and then creating standards and then a certification process for those centers, I think you could see a mind shift change happen for parents. It absolutely does affect your workforce. If you talk to Craig Richard, who is the CEO of the Tampa Bay Economic Development Corporation, he'll tell you the number one reason and the number two reason why companies relocate to any area is going to be transportation and then education. So if your transportation is substandard and your education is substandard, it's less likely that you're going to attract an Amazon or a Google to your community when they're looking for additional headquarters. As far as the money piece, we could talk about the low wage jobs that Florida has. That's a direct result of not having a quality early education system. We are dependent on service jobs. So it is going to be very hard to attract high skill, high wage employers if your economy is based on low wage service jobs. And so our state, more so than others through this pandemic, has really suffered because we got hit with a dual whammy, a process for unemployment that's broken, and then people who do service jobs that unfortunately people aren't out and about spending money. So it's all tied together. And that's what I loved about the documentary. It didn't just tackle one aspect of early education. It talked about every aspect and why it's so critical for us to really tackle now if we want to create a better future for future generations.
Awesome. Thank you for that. We have a question actually from the audience that's watching us right now. And this question I want to pitch to Angela. Angela, when we look at the supportive partnership with early learning with the providers, what has that been able to provide as opposed to being a punitive measure, if they don't do certain things? What are some things that have been accomplished? And is this unique to Florida, Tampa Bay, or the industry in general?
I think it is. We have, in childcare licensing, we have always enjoyed the relationships that we build with the providers, because I've always felt like, it's counterproductive. If you're wanting them to go a certain direction, it's counterproductive to go in a punitive manner. And we keep our inspectors in their caseloads 3 years, so they get that chance to develop that relationship. One thing that has come out in the last couple of years is a great collaboration with Marnie Fuente and her group at HCC and Child Care Licensing. And what we've developed is called the Quality Early Education System, which has lots of different parts to it. But my part really goes in and coaches early childhood providers on the business practices, the day-to-day operations of the facility. And they have found the response from the providers has been overwhelming. They love it. And from that, they have built their own association, which is nice for them, so they can call on each other. And in the recent past, it sounds kind of funny, but they've created a COVID support group for each other because, everyone's going through it. So I think that it's been a beautiful movement.
You just brought me to the next question, and Marnie, I want you to kind of lean on this. How has the early learning community in general been affected by COVID?
Oh, how haven't they? Really, it's had a global impact from, just the structure of how they're setting up the classrooms to the operations and the protocols that they need to put in place, pick up and drop off, teacher parent interactions. Normally the preschool teacher sees the parents twice a day. Now the parents are just dropping them off. The teacher child interaction in terms of kids running in and wanting to give a hug. Who has ever tried to social distance a 4-year-old? It's pretty significant. And, the socioeconomic impact is felt throughout. And I think we need to understand the psychological impact that it's having on all of us, but it's significant on the providers and the children and the families, because everybody wants to do the right thing, and the unpredictability and the associated stress that comes with it has really had a ripple effect from the top down. And I noted earlier that many of our providers have never closed, and if so, just for a brief period of time. And my team has been out there coaching and supporting throughout the process, because we understand the importance of supporting the workforce and building the workforce and providing the trainings and doing what we need to do to get them to the next space. And if I could, I also wanted to speak about our partnership with Child Care Licensing. Angela spoke briefly about the operation and management piece, but we also work with the children and the families, and our partnership with the community college is very unique in terms of it allows us to connect the children, the families of these children, to ongoing degree and workforce certification programs and the ongoing training, which we have not stopped since COVID. And with that's really this holistic approach, and the village approach is the premise for the quality early education system funded by the Children's Board of Hillsborough County. And again, we could not be more proud of our providers, and also our partnership with the community college.
Stefania, I want you to kind of chime in on this too, but then also, I know we mentioned about standards and getting our children ready for the next phase. So, you have experience with, Florida pre-K standards, and I want you to kind of talk about that too. So let's first talk about the impact that COVID has on the early learning environment, and then also some standards that help kids and what that's all about.
And I think Attorney Narain, he beautifully said it earlier regarding, a system being, well, not having a system in place for early childhood education to allow that high quality, structure to happen, or the education to happen. And I do know that Florida does have pre-K standards. It's a 180-page document. And it has 8 domains that parents or, anyone in the community is basically, they are, that document is available to them. And so for those 8 domains, it stresses what students need to know and be able to do by the end of their specific age-related, their age-related group. And so with that, you have your physical development, there's math, science, language, listening, there are approaches to learning. So there's a lot of different opportunities for one to take advantage of by previewing those pre-K to 4 standards. But that document is available. It starts at birth to 8 months and it ends at 4 years old. So if there's anyone in the community that has, a program where they're providing wraparound services, that would be a great resource for them to take advantage of, especially during COVID-19. It is very explicit.
Awesome. So as a parent, as most of you guys all know, I've got 2 boys. And the one thing I learned that kids, especially young kids, do that we adults sometimes forget to do is they share everything. So including germs. And so the first thing that we realize is when one kid at a daycare gets sick, all of them get it because they share everything. Now enter the COVID era. And we already are now at this heightened level of anxiety and fear and questioning every single thing. So Angela, while we're in this pandemic, what resources are available as parents who feel anxious about leaving their child at a daycare or childcare center, early learning center? What resources are available to them? One, to just ease their level of angst, and then to let them know that there are supports available.
Right. So first, the child care community, all the programs, they're thankfully, the regulations have always mandated that they do very stringent sanitation, and now it's just upped, 10 million times. And they really have stepped up to it. I mean, the programs are putting in a lot of mitigation, temperature taking, hand washing at the door, parents not coming in, but it's still, even the staff at childcare, it's still a nerve-wracking time right now, and parents are having to make some tough decisions. There's lots of good resources out there. Of course, parents, we invite always to call our office. I've got staff on duty all the time that can answer questions, even if they just want to ask, what are the guidelines? What do they have to do? The Children's Board, Family Resource Centers, they also have a web page that has a list of resources for parents. The CDC has resources. There's lots and lots of messaging out there right now. So I don't think there's a shortage of resources if people just know where to go, which is a challenge.
Awesome. Major, you got anything to add to that?
I don't know as far as resources. I know the Boys and Girls Club that we partner with, their summer programs have all concluded. We do have another program, but it's more focused towards high school age kids with Cristo Rey, Salesian High School. But they're obviously out of session right now until things taper off and with COVID. So as far as alternative places in relation to where youth could go during this time of COVID, I don't really have a great answer. I know as far as the agency is concerned, we have provided a bunch of financial resources to other places that are providing services, but I just don't know specific places that would be a great place for people to go right now during this time of crisis with COVID.
And so, we're looking at the physical resources and, support as far as, sanitary items and making sure that everything's physically taken care of. But there's this level of angst as well for parents as well as workers. Marnie, what resources are there to help with the emotional state and emotional well-being of everyone through this?
So I was part of the conscious awareness learning model. We incorporate conscious discipline, mindful practices, and positive psychology. And we've actually doubled the amount of trainings that since the pandemic, because of the overwhelming feeling that all of the providers are having, the families are having, and the children. So we have a parenting piece where we get the parents connected so they can talk about their feelings, and then simple strategies that we can do to try to get us through, just to the next day sometimes, because we're very pattern seeking individuals and our entire world has been uprooted and off schedule. And then we also do social emotional coaching in the classroom with the children, and we also do it virtually. So we have Zoom sessions one-on-one with the children and their families in their home, which has been really successful because we found that some parents have a difficult time figuring out how to approach this, what words to use, how to explain what's happening in a very relatable way to children. And, when we peel back the onion, I think we're all feeling the same. Sometimes we feel scared. Sometimes we feel like, unsafe. Sometimes we just want to be loved and have a connection. And then once we can, acknowledge that we are all, none of us are immune to it, and having those conversations and then working together on how to support everyone in the process. So, those resources are out there through our program.
I think we lost you at the tail end, Marnie.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said I'm not sure where you lost me, but all of those resources are available through our program. Again, we support the providers in doing these trainings, the families, as well as the one-on-one sessions with the children.
Good. Thank you. Ed, I want to come back to you for a second, again, from the workforce perspective. There are companies, we have a big retail industry here. You've addressed Florida, we have pockets and cities that have, a deep pocket of low wage jobs that are out there. But we also have companies that, are investing in childcare and support for childcare for their employees. How could providing childcare locally, on site, or at least supporting it for workers benefit a company's bottom line?
So I think it ultimately can help by providing I'm going to say healthcare, but providing childcare. Companies doing that actually helps worker productivity. Instead of an employee now having a place to drop their child off in the morning and then having to rush to work, they're bringing their child, in some cases, with companies like Google, right to their workplace. They're dropping their kid off downstairs, and that lunch hour, they're able to go down and socialize and be with their child. So, there's not that loss of connection. When my oldest child was born years ago, we made a conscious decision for my wife to stay home for 9 months. And financially, that was very hard, but we knew the importance of her having that bonding time with the baby. And we did it for both children. And we were flexible and able to do it because she's a school teacher. So she took a year out. A lot of families aren't able to do that. And unfortunately, it does have a toll on the emotional connection that a parent can make with their child when they're 6 weeks off of maternity leave or paternity leave, and they have to hand their child over to a daycare center. So I would love to see more of that. I was reading a little bit earlier about Home Depot and some of the things that they're doing. I saw where Walt Disney has a program with the Central Florida YMCAs. So it may not be an employer per se that has the capability of housing a daycare center or early childhood center in their facility, but they can look to create partnerships with organizations that specialize in this area and even provide subsidies to employees. People will take a lower amount in terms of compensation for the right benefit. And I can tell you a childcare benefit today is huge. And it could make the difference between a skilled worker choosing your company over somebody else's. So it's that important. And I think more companies need to make early education a key issue. In fact, I'd like to see it become something that our local chamber tackles. There are a lot of important issues that we're doing, but I think one of the things that can make the Tampa Bay region stand out is if we find a way for our larger employers to partner with not just the school system, but with our early childcare centers that are already in place to create programs for employers. We could really move the needle on this.
Chief, I've got a question for you. I mean, you've got officers on patrol, daily, and some of those officers have little ones of their own. And so how do you and how does your organization support those parents, those officers that are there for 10, 12 hours a day, but have a need to address childcare issues for their little ones?
Right. Well, Freddie, our city manager is very frankly, and working with our Parks and Rec director, they have developed a opportunity for those employees. I see I'm having unstable. Can you still hear me?
Yep, you're going in.
We're having a pretty bad thunderstorm here in Temple Terrace.
Okay.
But anyway, they have created a place for, not knowing what the school board's doing, but they have created a place and an opportunity for the officers, especially the day shift officers, which is primarily the trouble spot that we found anyway, and the day shift employees to bring their children into a safe, family-friendly environment where the kids can do the e-learning, they can participate in the recreational opportunities there at the family rec. And it's just a way that trying to anticipate the beginning of school, that the city manager was ahead of the game, trying to get us with an opportunity to take care of our kids, so that, again, in any environment, you take care of the kids so that your employees can then go out and do the job without the private sector. And I'm sure it is in multiple locations as well. The other thing is, I keep stressing it, but with respect to the early childhood development opportunities that the Children's Board's Family Resource Centers offer. I mean, you have the Children's Board, they're in the Ybor City, but there are many locations throughout Hillsborough County, and they specialize in some of the best. You can go out and look at the 3 to 5 year old opportunities for that support and early development. It's a tremendous resource for everybody throughout the county.
Stefan, I want you to kind of pitch in or chime in on the childcare topic.
Thank you, Freddie. I just wanted to comment on what Attorney Narain said regarding childcare. And while I'm all in favor for childcare in the private sector as well, it's also important to think about what's happening during childcare, and so that it's not just like a babysitting club or kids are just playing with Legos all day. What curriculum is being utilized during that time? And are kids exposed to those pre-K standards that are highlighted by the state of Florida? So those type of things are very important. And how is that being monitored, again, to ensure sustainability over time? So I think that's also important. So as that program is being built, those are things to ensure that we put those in place, again, to ensure sustainability over time.
One of the things, and I'm guilty of it, and I'm sure a lot of parents are, is, we looked at early child care centers as babysitters, right? And it wasn't until I actually just kind of walked in early to pick my sons up that I just saw all of the things that they were being taught in a given day. And so when we look at early preparedness and making sure that our kids are okay, we've got our Head Start children, we've got our VPK kids, and some of them have not been able to attend programs. They haven't been able to get that structure for development. So, Marnie and Angela, I'll start with you, Marnie. For those kids that have not been able to attend those programs, and those, especially our kids who are Head Start kids who really need it, how will those children and those parents catch up when these programs start again?
Well, I think there's a lot of work to be done, and it's going to take a collaborative effort with the teachers and the providers, programs like ours in coaching and mentoring and supporting the teachers to really get a baseline to assess where we are after the kids have been out of care for so long, and then really have a systematic approach to addressing the educational losses. And then our program with Early Literacy Matters, we're having a very strong push moving forward with those children that are entering pre-K, so we can have an intensive coaching and intervention services in the schools as well as the home, because it cannot just fall on the parents, and it can't just fall on the teacher. So we have to get those structures in place. We have to be able to provide playtime, and parents need to be able to find the time within their day to be present with the children, to find out exactly what their needs are, so then they can communicate that with their specialists and with their teachers.
Awesome. Angela?
Thank you. Yep, I agree completely. I mean, I echo what Marnie said. We identified and know, we're cognizant of the fact that because there's been such a disruption, it's going to have a trickle down effect. So there is going to be some catch up that needs to be done. And she's right, identifying a good baseline after this is over, or as it's going on, to see where we are and then how we can proceed. What I'd like to see happen is some really nice messaging going out to families on exactly what we're talking about, that there are, so they know there's going to be some gaps perhaps that they're going to need to also collaboratively work together with all of us and make the difference.
Awesome. For those of you that are watching and those of you that will watch it, we're going to upload this as a recording so people can see this far beyond today. There are resources available. There's a resource guide that has been developed as a result of the planning of this event. We want you to go on Safe and Sound Hillsborough's website. You'll be able to access that information, as well as the Children's Board's website as well, just to get resources as we navigate these uncharted waters with COVID, and also support early childhood education. We're coming down to the close, so I want to talk about the bottom line, and I want to hear from everyone. Outside, we've talked about the need for companies to address it. We've talked about the workers themselves. We've talked about how this transitions. If we stress the importance of early childhood learning, how it helps in the development of our young people into mature, responsible adults versus going down the path of delinquency. So now that we know that some of the things that are being done and some of the things that are available, what more is needed? How can we better support early education for children and families across our community? Ed, I want you to kind of kick us off here.
So it's a great question. And I think it again, to Angela's point earlier, it takes collaboration from multiple different sectors. It can't just be the folks in education saying, when you pick a daycare center, make sure you send your child to someplace that's certified and that has quality education. It has to be both the business community coming out and saying, hey, early education matters. And you need to have the nonprofit sector working and saying early education matters. We need, believe it or not, our churches even saying this, because parents, when they have a newborn child, for those of you who have children who are watching, if you can put your mind back to when you first had that baby, you had a whole bunch of different thoughts and you weren't sure what to do or what you were going to do. And I remember the analysis paralysis it created for us in trying to figure out where we were going to place our child. Now, luckily, I'm married to someone in education, so we were looking at different schools and going through the process because of her. Because if it was up to me, I would have been like, who's the closest daycare center on the way to me going into work in the morning? So we have to have a mindset shift, and that's going to take everybody working together. And Chief Albano, thank you so much for talking about the Children's Board and the neighborhood service centers that we have. The family resource centers are critical to being able to touch the needs of families in this community. And I would be wrong if I didn't take a moment to invite everybody to the virtual grand opening of the Temple Terrace Center, which is going to be named after our long-time board member of the Children's Board and past school board member and past school board chair, Ms. Doretha Edgecombe. That's going to be on August 31st at 2 o'clock. It is virtual, so look out for that. We would love to have the community there to support that. But thank you all very much for this opportunity to preach about early learning, because I really think it's one of the key things that we can invest in now that's going to have a large payoff later.
Chief, some closing words and thoughts.
Well, Freddie, these things are all great. And thank you, Ed, for mentioning the virtual grand opening. One fundamental truth for me, Freddie, and that is, what can we do better? Safe and Sound's mission is getting out there and reaching the community, reaching the kids. And we talk about it from that respect. But with respect to early childhood learning, it's going to take the community to help us reach into the parts of the community where they don't know about this, and to try to connect hand to hand to get those children into the opportunities that they need, and not only into the opportunities that they need, but to help those families that might need some of this support to figure things out. You know, we are all products of our upbringing, and I know just from the service that I've provided and going into different homes, there's vast differences from one home to another, and it's not necessarily about any one particular thing. It really does focus on your upbringing and your thoughts. And you know, some of our parents may not even know about this documentary. We have to get this documentary and available for them to see. We have to build those lines of communication. How they can provide it in the home, and then all these services that are available throughout Hillsborough County.
Awesome. Marnie.
What can we do better? I think we can be conscious advocates that are really committed to the awesome responsibility of educating our youngest learners. And knowing that you don't have to have a child to have a profound impact on them. And every day that we go out into our community and we interact with each other, we are role models. And if I could drive one thing home, I think it's really being mindful of that. And so as we interact with each other and we approach and respond to children, let's do it with compassion and care and empathy, because they'll remember how we treat them and each other, and how invested we are in them and their education, and especially when we get on the other side of this.
Awesome. Major.
Well, now we talked about it. Now we got to be about it. We got to challenge all the stakeholders to not only establish intentional relationships, but they have to put the money where the mouth is. And that's not to one entity or the next. But I know from an organizational standpoint, at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, we are very, very understanding of what it takes to fund some of these different activities. And there's plenty of youth out there that are crying for an opportunity. They're crying for an opportunity for assistance. And sometimes a lot of that assistance is in the form of financial assets. So I think it's great that we have these discussions, but we have to reach out to the stakeholders and get everybody to buy in and drive these efforts towards one common goal.
Awesome. Angela.
I'm gonna mute myself. I liked what Chief Albano said about having the parents watch this documentary. And I think all of us are probably on the same page that really everybody needs to watch it. And I would even venture to say the child care workforce needs to watch it, because I don't even know that they know how important they are. And so I think that's a great place to start. And the major is right as well, is that, you know, we can talk and talk, but it's time to really, and now is a great time to do it, because we are, you know, in kind of crisis mode. So it's a good time to get some good messaging out, I think, and make people aware of the importance going forward.
Awesome. Vanya.
And I think everyone has touched on where I, want to go. But to Myrnie's point, it's definitely about the physical relationships and our interactions with children at an early age. But we have to get the right people on the bus, like the people that are skilled in specific areas, the people that feel invested in our future, which of course are our children. We have to develop a solid system in place to educate all stakeholders, from parents to anyone that interacts with children, to make it happen. And it sounds like Safe and Sound just may be that entity to get the conversation going.
Well, we'll help get the conversation going. But my boss Chief over here is going to tell me stop taking on things by herself. So we'll definitely be a partner. I want to thank all of our panelists for this discussion. I want to thank those individuals that are watching it. I want to thank you for your questions. I want to thank everyone who put this together. I want to thank the Children's Board for really thrusting this to the forefront as we go through this pandemic, and as we look at how we're going to unpack things and how we're going to address things going forward. Closing words from everyone were great. And we want you to know, those that are watching and those that will watch, again, there are resources out here for parents, for the workers themselves, for the students that will ultimately help us as we move forward. But we know that this is a very timely discussion. We want to thank everyone for participating. And with closing words, we have to understand that addressing the importance of early childhood education is no small matter. Thank you for tuning in.